Chapter 1. The Early Years. George Washington was born on February 22, 1732, in Westmoreland County, Virginia. His parents, Augustine and Mary Ball Washington, had a large and bustling tobacco plantation. George was the eldest of 6 children. He was an energetic and curious boy, always eager to explore the acres of farmland that surrounded his home. Life on a tobacco plantation was never dull. There were fields to be sown, crops to be harvested, and livestock to be cared for. The young George was often found following his father around, watching and learning about the workings of the plantation. Despite the serious responsibilities of running such a large estate, Augustine always found time to teach George valuable lessons about honesty, diligence, and respect. However, not all memories of George's childhood were pleasant. His father's sudden death when George was just 11 years old was a harsh blow to the family. George was expected to take on adult responsibilities far earlier than most boys his age. He found himself helping his mother manage the plantation and care for his younger siblings. Yet, even amidst the hardship, George never lost his drive for learning. He had a natural curiosity about the world around him. His favorite subject was mathematics, which later proved invaluable in his career as a land surveyor. With books borrowed from the wealthy Fairfax family, he studied tirelessly, his thirst for knowledge undiminished. His boyhood was marked by both joy and sadness, triumph and tragedy. But these experiences helped shape him into the man he would later become. They taught him the value of hard work, the importance of perseverance, and the strength of character. These early years were the foundation of the life of a boy who would one day become the first president of the United States, a leader who would guide his country through its most challenging times. From the tobacco fields of Virginia to the highest office in the land, George Washington's journey began in these humble beginnings. The year 1743 brought with it a dark cloud over the Washington family. Augustine Washington, the strong, wise father who was the rock of the family, fell ill. The illness was sudden and severe. It swept through him like a summer storm, leaving the family helpless in its wake. George was just 11 years old when his father passed away. He still held on to the memories of his father teaching him to ride a horse, showing him the plantation fields, or sharing stories about life's many lessons. Now, all of that was a world away. Mary, George's mother, was left to fend for herself and her young children. As the eldest, George felt a weight on his young shoulders. He saw his mother struggle, the way her eyes held a constant hint of worry. It was a harsh transition from carefree boyhood to the serious responsibilities of adulthood. The plantation required constant work. There was no room for sorrow, no time for a boy to mourn his father. George found himself walking the tobacco fields that his father once managed, his youthful energy now devoted to preserving the family's livelihood. Despite the challenge, he approached these responsibilities with a quiet determination that was beyond his years. In these troubled times, George began to understand the meaning of loss, responsibility, and strength. He saw the world not through the eyes of a boy, but through the prism of hard experiences. His father's death, while a deep personal loss, served as a painful catalyst to maturity. George's resilience was evident. He became a beacon of strength for his family, a young man stepping into the large shoes left by his father. But his heart still yearned for the guidance of his father, his wise words and comforting presence. The sorrow of Augustine's death was a profound chapter in George's early life. However, the experience hardened his resolve and sharpened his character. It was an ordeal that shaped the future leader in him, molding a boy into a man before his time. Despite the heavy responsibilities that befell George after his father's death, he never allowed his circumstances to overshadow his dreams and ambitions. His thirst for knowledge was like a candle that refused to be extinguished. The young George, even amidst his familial duties, nurtured a profound curiosity about the world around him. George didn't have the privilege of formal education, like many boys from wealthier families. Nevertheless, he was determined to learn. He made good use of the limited resources available to him, borrowing books from the local library and the Fairfax family, who were family friends and well-respected members of Virginia society. He had a special fondness for mathematics and developed a keen interest in geography and map-making. He would often be found with a book in his hands, his eyes gliding over the pages, absorbing knowledge like a sponge. Beyond his intellectual pursuits, George also dreamed of a life beyond the boundaries of his family's plantation. The tales of seafaring explorers and valiant soldiers sparked his imagination. He desired to make a mark on the world, to be a part of something grander than himself. This ambition was not merely a flight of fancy. George was already demonstrating leadership traits that belied his youth. His siblings and the plantation workers often looked to him for guidance and support, as he had a natural ability to lead and inspire those around him. Even as a young man, he showed a keen sense of fairness, a deep respect for others, and a steadfast resolve that earned him admiration and respect. George's ambition did not go unnoticed. William Fairfax, the patriarch of the Fairfax family, recognized George's potential. He took the young boy under his wing, providing him opportunities to learn about surveying and offering him his first job as a surveyor. This was a turning point in George's life, a chance to step onto a path that would take him far beyond the confines of his family's plantation. In these formative years, George's thirst for knowledge and his burning ambition hinted at his future greatness. The challenges he faced did not deter him. Instead, they shaped him, molding him into a person of remarkable resilience and determination. This period in George's life was a testament to his potential, the early inkling of the remarkable man he would become. Chapter 2: Journey to Adulthood. At the age of 17, George was appointed as the official surveyor of Culpeper County by William Fairfax. This marked the beginning of a significant chapter in his life. With his surveyor's compass and chain in hand, George set out into the wilderness, ready to mark and measure the land. The job of a surveyor was a challenging one, particularly in the uncharted landscapes of Virginia. George was often away from home for days, braving dense forests, wild animals, and unpredictable weather. He would traverse rugged terrain, cross rushing rivers, and climb steep hills, all to ensure the accurate mapping of the land. Despite these hardships, George remained dedicated to his work. His mathematics skills proved invaluable as he meticulously recorded his findings, drew maps, and prepared official reports. His attention to detail, discipline, and perseverance earned him the respect of landowners and fellow surveyors alike. The job also brought George face to face with the frontier life, introducing him to settlers from various walks of life. He saw their struggles, their courage, and their relentless pursuit of a better life. These experiences gave him a deeper understanding of his fellow countrymen, a perspective that would greatly influence his future leadership. His work as a surveyor wasn't just a means to an income, it was an education in itself. It taught him the value of precision, the importance of grit, and the power of determination. But perhaps most importantly, it provided him with a broader view of the world, stretching beyond the familiar boundaries of his family's plantation. Even in these early years, George's integrity, his work ethic, and his quiet strength were on display. His first job was a test of his character and resilience, a test he passed with flying colors. The experience helped shape him, refining the raw potential of his youth into the makings of a remarkable man. This was just the beginning of George Washington's journey to adulthood, a journey marked by hard work, self-reliance, and an unwavering spirit. During George's surveying trips into the Virginia wilderness, he started to encounter more and more French military forces who were encroaching upon British-claimed territories. This marked the beginnings of the struggle between Britain and France for control over the vast, rich lands of North America. George's work brought him in direct contact with these simmering tensions, stirring within him a sense of duty to his homeland. In 1752, George's half-brother Lawrence, who was a commander of the Virginia militia, fell gravely ill. Sensing his time was short, Lawrence appointed George to take over his role in the militia. Although this role was initially honorary, it soon took on real significance. When Lawrence passed away later that year, the 20-year-old George found himself holding a prominent military position. Eager to serve and defend his homeland, George plunged headfirst into his new role. He studied military tactics, learned the art of command, and spent countless hours training his men. He was both stern and fair, earning the respect of those under his command. The first major test of George's military career came when he was tasked to deliver a letter to the French, demanding they leave British territory. The mission was fraught with danger, requiring a journey of hundreds of miles through harsh, snowy wilderness. George faced numerous trials during this mission, including a near drowning in an ice-choked river and an ambush by Native Americans allied with the French. Despite these adversities, George carried out his mission with courage and determination. His resilience in the face of danger and his dedication to his duty were evident. These experiences marked the beginnings of his military calling, a calling that would lead him to play a key role in the battles that were to shape the future of his nation. As he faced the challenges of his new position, George's character and leadership abilities began to shine. His commitment to serving his homeland was unwavering, and he demonstrated an innate ability to inspire those around him. The call of duty had resonated deeply within the young Washington, marking the start of a military career that would be intertwined with the birth of a new nation. Amidst the responsibilities of his work and military duties, George's personal life took an emotional turn. He met Mary Phillips, a beautiful and cultured young woman from a wealthy New York family. Mary was everything George admired: intelligent, gracious, and charming. It didn't take long for George to fall deeply in love. However, George was not the only man vying for Mary's attention. His military duties often kept him away, and during one of his absences, Mary chose another suitor. When George returned to find the woman he loved married to another, he was crushed. But George was no stranger to adversity. Just as he had done after his father's death and in his challenging career, he once again picked up the pieces. He threw himself into his duties with a renewed intensity. He was not one to dwell on his losses. He chose instead to focus on his responsibilities and the service of his homeland. Despite his heartbreak, George's world took a turn for the better when he crossed paths with a charming widow named Martha Dandridge Custis. Martha, with her gentle manners and kind heart, won George over. Their love story began to unfold, hinting at the happiness that awaited the young soldier. George's journey to adulthood was marked not only by duty and responsibility, but also by love and loss. These experiences shaped his character, teaching him resilience in the face of personal heartbreak. His capacity to recover and find love again was a testament to his strength and his ability to embrace life's highs and lows. In these personal trials, just as in his professional life, George showed an unwavering ability to persevere, a trait that would guide him through the many challenges yet to come. His first taste of love and loss was another stepping stone in his journey, shaping the young man who would one day lead a nation. Chapter 3: A Soldier's Life. As the friction between the French and the British in North America escalated, George's military role became increasingly crucial. He was about to step into the world of war, marking the start of his life as a soldier. His first significant military engagement was in 1754, during what came to be known as the French and Indian War. George, serving as a lieutenant colonel, was dispatched with his troops to claim the Ohio Valley, a region both the French and British coveted. His orders were to confront any French forces he encountered. While en route, George and his men came across a small French detachment. A skirmish broke out, and by its end, the French commander was killed. This incident, known as the Battle of Jumonville Glen, sparked the beginning of the war. Several months later, George faced a major battle at Fort Necessity. Despite his valiant efforts, he was outnumbered and outmaneuvered by the French forces. George was forced to surrender, a bitter experience for the young officer. However, he learned valuable lessons from this defeat, lessons about preparation, strategy, and the harsh realities of war. These initial battles were a baptism of fire for George. They taught him the complexities of military leadership and the price of miscalculations. He witnessed the horrors of war and experienced the taste of defeat. However, he also learned the importance of resilience, strategy, and the courage to face whatever came his way. George's early military experiences were pivotal in shaping him as a soldier and as a leader. He learned to adapt, to persevere, and to rise from defeat stronger and wiser. These experiences laid the groundwork for his future military endeavors, molding a resilient soldier who would one day lead his nation to victory. The life of a soldier was never easy. It was filled with danger, hardships, and tough lessons. But George embraced this life with determination and honor, proving his mettle in the face of adversity. His journey had only just begun, and already he was showing signs of the great leader he was to become. Following the Battle of Fort Necessity, George resigned his commission. However, his military career was far from over. When General Edward Braddock was appointed to command the British forces against the French, George offered his services as an aide-de-camp. In the Battle of Monongahela in 1755, a disastrous defeat for the British, George's true leadership qualities began to shine. During the battle, General Braddock was mortally wounded, and chaos ensued amongst the troops. It was George who took the reins, demonstrating exceptional courage and decisiveness. Despite having 2 horses shot out from under him and 4 bullets tearing through his coat, he rallied the troops and organized a retreat, preventing a total massacre. His bravery and leadership during the battle did not go unnoticed. George's reputation soared among the colonial militiamen and the British officers alike. He was hailed as a hero, a beacon of strength and courage amidst the smoke and confusion of the battlefield. After Braddock's death, George was given command of the Virginia Regiment, making him one of the most senior military figures in the colonies at only 23. With this command, he set about training his men, not just as fighters, but as disciplined soldiers. His insistence on order, discipline, and preparation reflected his growing maturity as a leader. During his time as commander, he led several successful expeditions, driving the French out of many parts of the Ohio Valley. Despite the odds, George's leadership, tactical acumen, and relentless determination led his men to victory. In these trying times, a leader was emerging in George Washington. His experiences on the battlefield had honed his natural leadership abilities, transforming him from a raw, passionate young officer into a seasoned leader. He carried the weight of his responsibilities with dignity and strength, earning the respect and admiration of those he led. His journey was far from over, but he was undeniably on the path to greatness. The French and Indian War, known in Europe as the 7 Years' War, was a pivotal period in George Washington's military career. The war, which stretched from 1754 to 1763, was a fierce struggle for control of North America between the British and French colonies. During this time, George's role as the commander of the Virginia Regiment saw him on the front lines of numerous battles. These conflicts, while violent and costly, provided him with invaluable insights into warfare, strategy, and leadership. One of the most critical lessons he learned was the importance of alliances. The Native American tribes, with their knowledge of the land and guerrilla warfare tactics, played a significant role in the conflict. George came to understand the power of forging alliances and the strategic advantage of fighting alongside people who knew the terrain intimately. He also recognized the value of well-trained and disciplined troops. The chaotic retreat at the Battle of Monongahela had taught him a bitter lesson about the dangers of ill-prepared and disorganized soldiers. From then on, he insisted on rigorous training and discipline among his men, transforming the Virginia Regiment into a formidable fighting force. Moreover, the war exposed the challenges of working under the British military hierarchy. The dismissive attitude of the British officers towards colonial leaders often led to disagreements and frustration. These experiences would later inform his leadership style and his insistence on respect and unity among his officers during the Revolutionary War. By the time the French and Indian War ended in 1763, George had been hardened by the realities of warfare. He had seen the horrors of battle, the complexities of political alliances, and the impacts of strong leadership. These experiences significantly shaped his understanding of conflict and his role within it. The war was a crucible, forging George into a seasoned military leader. Through it all, he maintained his integrity, his dedication to his troops, and his commitment to his homeland. It was a chapter in his life that prepared him for the even greater challenges that awaited him in the future. Chapter 4. Mount Vernon. Upon his return from the French and Indian War, George focused his energies on transforming Mount Vernon, the plantation he had inherited from his beloved brother Lawrence, into his permanent home. It was not just about building a house. It was about creating a sanctuary, a place where he could enjoy the peace and quiet that his military life had so often denied him. When George first took over Mount Vernon, the house was modest and the plantation largely unimproved. He set out to transform it with a grand vision in his mind. This was to be a place that reflected his status and achievements, and yet was also a warm and welcoming home. George's interest in architecture and his meticulous nature were evident in the careful planning and design of Mount Vernon. He expanded the house from its original 8 rooms to 21 and added a stunning 2-story piazza overlooking the Potomac River. He designed each space thoughtfully, ensuring that it was both elegant and functional. But Mount Vernon was more than just a house. The surrounding plantation was just as important to George. He experimented with different crops, transitioning from tobacco, which exhausted the soil, to wheat, which was more sustainable. He also built a grist mill and a distillery, making Mount Vernon largely self-sufficient. Despite the grandeur of Mount Vernon, George's touch is visible in the comfortable, welcoming atmosphere of the house. It was not just a showpiece but a home, filled with laughter, warmth, and hospitality. George was as dedicated to building Mount Vernon as he was to any of his military duties. He poured his energy, resources, and time into creating a place he could be proud of. For George, Mount Vernon was more than just a home. It was a testament to his hard work, his taste, and his love for the land. In building Mount Vernon, George was also building a life away from the battlefield, a sanctuary where he could rest, reflect, and spend time with the people he loved. It was a crucial part of his journey, a place that played a significant role in shaping the man George Washington was to become. As George was building his home at Mount Vernon, he crossed paths with a woman who would become a vital part of his life, Martha Dandridge Custis. A wealthy widow with 2 young children, Martha was known for her charm, kindness, and resilience. When George first met her, he was immediately taken by her grace and strength. Their courtship was brief. George, captivated by Martha's warmth and vitality, soon proposed marriage. For Martha, George was a source of comfort and stability, a man who accepted her and her children with open arms. They married in January 1759, marking the beginning of a partnership that would endure the trials of war, politics, and personal loss. Martha became an essential part of George's life, bringing joy and comfort to his world. She proved to be a devoted wife, providing George with emotional support and companionship. She also proved to be a loving stepmother to her 2 children, Jackie and Patsy, treating them with care and kindness. The Mount Vernon plantation flourished under their combined stewardship. Martha's knack for management and her attention to detail perfectly complemented George's vision and dedication. Together, they turned Mount Vernon into a thriving estate, a haven for family and friends. George's love for Martha was profound and enduring. He wrote in a letter to her, "I am now, I believe, fixed at this seat with an agreeable consort for life, and hope to find more happiness in retirement than I ever experienced amidst a wide and bustling world." Meeting and marrying Martha was a significant chapter in George's life. It marked the beginning of a lifelong partnership that provided him with a loving, supportive home life. This period in his life was one of building and nurturing, a house, a plantation, a marriage, and a family. It was a time of growth and contentment, integral to the journey of the man who would become the first president of the United States. With his marriage to Martha and the development of Mount Vernon, George experienced a period of relative peace and tranquility. This was a time for him to take a breather from the duties and conflicts that had occupied much of his early adulthood. It was a moment of respite, a taste of a peaceful life before he was once again called to serve his country. George and Martha's days were filled with the joys and tasks of managing a bustling plantation. They spent time with their children, oversaw the many activities on the estate, and enjoyed the company of their many visitors. Their life was busy but fulfilling, providing a sense of balance to the hectic nature of George's military life. Despite his many responsibilities, George found time to pursue his personal interests. He read extensively, took an active role in community affairs, and nurtured his passion for farming. He experimented with innovative farming methods and aimed to make Mount Vernon an example of agricultural progress. During these years, George's reputation as a farmer and leader in his community grew. He was elected to the Virginia House of Burgesses, marking the beginning of his political career. But for now, politics was just a small part of his life, overshadowed by the day-to-day joys and challenges of his life at Mount Vernon. This period of relative peace was a precious time for George. It was a chance for him to enjoy the fruits of his labor, to revel in the love of his family, and to engage in the tranquility of rural life. It was a period of calm before the storm of conflict and revolution that was on the horizon. This respite from conflict gave George a chance to reflect, to learn, and to grow. The lessons he learned during this time about love, family, community, and balance would serve him well in the tumultuous years to come. This taste of peace was a critical part of his journey, a chapter in the life of a man who was destined to lead a nation. Chapter 5. Political Stirrings. While George was enjoying his peaceful life at Mount Vernon, a wave of discontent was building across the 13 colonies. The British government, struggling with the debts incurred during the French and Indian War, imposed a series of taxes on the colonists. The Stamp Act, the Townshend Acts, and the Tea Act were met with increasing resistance, sparking the initial rumblings of revolution. As a member of the Virginia House of Burgesses, George was not isolated from these political stirrings. He, like many of his contemporaries, felt the pinch of the British taxes. He understood the increasing frustration among the colonists, the feeling of being unfairly burdened without representation in the British Parliament. George was initially a moderate voice, advocating for peaceful protests against the British policies. However, as the British government responded with more repressive measures, his views began to shift. The passage of the Intolerable Acts, which closed the port of Boston and imposed military rule in Massachusetts, deeply alarmed George. This period marked a significant turning point for George. He had always been a loyal British subject, proud of his British heritage. But the escalating conflict between the colonies and Britain began to change his perspective. He felt a growing allegiance to his fellow colonists and their shared plight. This was a time of transition for George, a time when the calm life he had been leading was disturbed by the winds of political unrest. As the whispers of revolution grew louder, George found himself drawn into the conflict. His loyalties were being tested, his beliefs questioned. The quiet life at Mount Vernon was increasingly overshadowed by the rumblings of revolution, hinting at the turbulent times that lay ahead. As tensions continued to mount between the colonies and Britain, representatives from 12 of the 13 colonies met in Philadelphia in 1774. This gathering, known as the First Continental Congress, aimed to articulate the colonial response to the British policies. George was among the 7 delegates chosen to represent Virginia. George arrived at the Congress in his military uniform, a silent yet powerful statement of his readiness to defend the rights of the colonists. His reputation as a seasoned soldier and a respected leader lent weight to his presence. In the Congress, George was not the most vocal participant, but his opinions held sway. He listened carefully to the debates, taking in the diverse perspectives of the delegates. Despite the mounting calls for independence, George remained cautious. He supported a resolution calling for an economic boycott of British goods, hoping that such pressure might cause the British government to address their grievances. However, he also knew the value of preparedness. He endorsed a proposal for the colonies to raise and train their own militias, seeing the wisdom in being ready should peaceful protests turn into open conflict. His time in the Congress deepened George's understanding of the broader political landscape. He interacted with representatives from different colonies, gaining insights into their diverse cultures, economies, and views. These experiences enriched his perspective, transforming him from a local leader into a figure of continental importance. George's participation in the First Continental Congress marked his transition from a military leader to a political one. It was an essential step in his journey, hinting at the prominent role he was to play in the founding of a new nation. Amid the heated debates and revolutionary ideas, George stood as a figure of quiet strength and resolve. his leadership qualities shining through in this time of political stirrings. Despite the efforts of the First Continental Congress to address colonial grievances, the British government remained dismissive. The colonial boycotts were met with even stricter policies and sanctions. Tensions escalated, and the colonies found themselves on the precipice of war. George, like many of his contemporaries, held on to the hope for reconciliation with Britain. However, he also recognized the need for the colonies to prepare for the potential conflict. His belief in peaceful protest did not blind him to the reality that they might have to fight for their rights. In Virginia, George took an active role in organizing and training a local militia. His experience from the French and Indian War was invaluable in these efforts. He knew that if war came, the colonies would need disciplined, trained soldiers who could stand against the professional British Army. News of the battles of Lexington and Concord in April 1775 arrived like a thunderclap. The skirmishes between the local militia and British troops in Massachusetts marked the outbreak of open-armed conflict. Any lingering hopes for a peaceful resolution were shattered. Despite the grim news, George did not waver. The peaceful life at Mount Vernon now seemed like a distant memory as he prepared for the reality of war. His years of military experience, his leadership skills, and his deep sense of duty prepared him for the monumental task ahead. As the colonies inched closer to war, George Washington found himself at the heart of the conflict. The rumblings of revolution had grown into a storm, and George was ready to face it. He was no longer just a soldier or a statesman. He was a leader on the cusp of a war that would shape the destiny of a nation. Chapter 6: A Nation at War. The outbreak of conflict between the colonies and Britain called for strong, decisive leadership. The Second Continental Congress convened in May 1775, in the midst of this growing crisis. One of the most pressing issues they faced was the formation of a unified colonial army and the appointment of a commander-in-chief. George attended the Congress in his military uniform, a silent statement of his readiness to serve. His military experience, his leadership during the French and Indian War, and his involvement in the First Continental Congress all combined to make him a standout choice. On June 15, 1775, George Washington was unanimously elected as Commander-in-Chief of the Continental Army. Despite his obvious qualifications, George humbly accepted the position with reservations. In his acceptance speech, he refused any payment for his service beyond his expenses and asked for the understanding of the Congress, stating, "I do not think myself equal to the command I am honored with." However, despite his humility, George was prepared to take on this immense responsibility. His years of military and political experience had shaped him into a leader who could inspire confidence and command respect. He knew the challenges that lay ahead would be immense, but he was ready to face them head-on. This appointment marked a significant turning point in George's life. He was now the leader of a fledgling army, tasked with fighting against one of the world's most powerful empires. It was a daunting responsibility, but one he was prepared to shoulder. As George took the reins of the Continental Army, he embarked on a new chapter in his journey. The farmer from Virginia, the soldier, the statesman, was now the commander-in-chief of a revolution. He stood at the helm of a nation at war, ready to lead his people towards an uncertain future. In the winter of 1777 to 1778, George faced one of the most daunting challenges of his military career. His army, now known as the Continental Army, had to endure the harsh winter at Valley Forge, Pennsylvania. These were testing times that would demand every ounce of resilience from George and his men. At Valley Forge, the army was plagued with severe shortages of food, clothing, and shelter. The soldiers were often forced to contend with freezing temperatures without adequate clothing or blankets. Many fell ill, and morale plummeted as the winter wore on. Despite these dire circumstances, George refused to let despair take hold. He shared in his men's hardships, staying with them at Valley Forge rather than taking comfortable quarters elsewhere. His presence among the men, his obvious concern for their welfare, and his unwavering resolve served as a beacon of hope for the beleaguered soldiers. During this challenging time, George also displayed his strategic acumen. He used the period of encampment to train his men systematically, transforming the ragtag Continental Army into a disciplined fighting force. Under the guidance of Baron Friedrich von Steuben, a Prussian military officer, the soldiers were drilled in modern warfare tactics, significantly improving their efficiency and discipline. The winter at Valley Forge was a test of endurance, a crucible that threatened to break the resolve of the Continental Army. But under George's leadership, the army emerged from the ordeal stronger and more united. His ability to maintain morale in the face of despair, to use adversity as a tool for growth, and to lead by example cemented his place as a leader of extraordinary caliber. As they marched out of Valley Forge in the spring of 1778, George and his men carried with them not just the scars of a harsh winter, but the resilience born of shared hardship. The ordeal had transformed them into a unified fighting force, ready to face the battles that lay ahead in the fight for independence. The Revolutionary War was a long and arduous struggle, with both the British and the Continental Army experiencing victories and defeats. However, by 1778, the tide of the war began to shift in favor of the Americans, and George Washington was at the forefront of this change. The French decision to enter the war on the side of the Americans was a crucial turning point. Their support brought much-needed financial aid, supplies, and military reinforcement, strengthening the American effort considerably. George skillfully navigated this new alliance, coordinating strategies with French officers and combining forces to exert greater pressure on the British. A significant victory came in 1781 at the Battle of Yorktown, where George led a combined force of American and French soldiers. The strategic encirclement and siege of the British troops resulted in the surrender of General Lord Cornwallis, marking a decisive American victory. It effectively ended the major military operations of the Revolutionary War, turning the tide irrevocably in favor of the Americans. These turning points did not come about merely by luck or happenstance. They were the result of strategic decisions, careful planning, and the resilient leadership of George Washington. Despite facing a well-trained, well-equipped, and experienced enemy, George remained steadfast. He inspired his troops to fight bravely, rallied support from allies, and outmaneuvered the British on numerous occasions. The changing fortunes of the Continental Army under George's leadership was not just a testament to his military acumen, but also his ability to inspire and unite. He held together an undisciplined army and a fledgling nation, leading them towards an unlikely victory. It was a testament to his character, his leadership, and his unwavering belief in the cause of independence. The tide had turned, and George Washington was leading his nation towards the dawn of a new era. Chapter 7. Independence. The year 1776 marked a pivotal moment in the history of the American colonies. As the Revolutionary War raged on, the Continental Congress met in Philadelphia to discuss the future of the colonies. George Washington, who was leading the war effort against the British, was not present at the Congress, but his influence was felt. On July 4, 1776, the Second Continental Congress adopted the Declaration of Independence. The document, primarily authored by Thomas Jefferson, proclaimed the colonies' separation from Britain and their emergence as a new independent nation, the United States of America. News of the declaration reached George at his headquarters in New York. It was a momentous occasion, the realization of what they had been fighting for. Reading the document to his troops, George inspired them with the ideals of liberty, equality, and self-governance that the Declaration embodied. Despite the challenging war situation, the Declaration boosted the morale of the troops. It gave a clear purpose to their struggle, an affirmation that their sacrifices were for the noble cause of independence. For George, it cemented his resolve to lead his army to victory against the British forces. The Declaration of Independence was a turning point in the Revolutionary War. It shifted the goalposts from mere protest against British taxation to a fight for full independence. This was the moment when the rumbles of discontent transformed into a full-throated roar for liberty. As George Washington led his troops into battle, he carried with him not just the weight of military command, but the hopes and dreams of a new nation. The Declaration of Independence was a beacon, guiding him and his troops as they fought for their newly proclaimed country. It was a chapter in his life that underscored the significance of his role as a leader, a warrior, and a founding father of a new nation. The Revolutionary War was a prolonged struggle, filled with victories and losses for both sides. However, in the autumn of 1781, a significant battle took place that would drastically change the course of the war. This was the Battle of Yorktown, a turning point that led the colonies to the threshold of victory. Under George Washington's command, American and French forces laid siege to the British Army led by General Lord Cornwallis in Yorktown, Virginia. With the French Navy cutting off any possible escape by sea, and with the combined American and French forces attacking by land, Cornwallis's troops were effectively trapped. The siege lasted for several days, with George overseeing the operations meticulously. His strategy, his determination, and his resilience were on full display during the grueling battle. Finally, on October 19, 1781, Cornwallis surrendered. The British defeat at Yorktown was a decisive victory for the American forces and marked the end of major fighting in the Revolutionary War. The news of victory at Yorktown was received with jubilation across the colonies. It signaled that the end of the war was in sight, and with it, the confirmation of their independence. For George, it was the culmination of years of relentless struggle, a testament to the resilience and tenacity of his troops. The victory at Yorktown did not just mark a military triumph, it was a victory of the ideals that George and his fellow patriots were fighting for. It was a victory of their belief in their right to self-governance, liberty, and independence. This pivotal moment in George's life underscored his leadership, his strategic acumen, and his unyielding determination. The man who had taken up the command of a ragtag continental army had led them to an improbable victory. It was a moment that exemplified George's journey, a testament to his essential role in the fight for independence. The victory at Yorktown marked the beginning of the end of the Revolutionary War. In 1783, the Treaty of Paris was signed, which formally ended the war and recognized the sovereignty of the United States over the territory from the Atlantic coast to the Mississippi River. The war's end was met with widespread celebration throughout the colonies. George, the man who had led the Continental Army through years of struggle, was hailed as a hero. His leadership, his dedication, and his unwavering faith in the cause of independence had steered the colonies through their darkest times and into the light of victory. However, amid the triumph, George made a decision that surprised many. Instead of using his fame and popularity to seize political power, he chose to resign as Commander-in-Chief of the Continental Army. In a moving speech before Congress, he expressed his desire to return to his beloved Mount Vernon and live as a private citizen. His decision to step down from power was unprecedented. It demonstrated his commitment to the principles of the Revolution, that power should lie not with one person but with the people. His actions set a standard for civic virtue and democratic values. In this moment of triumph and farewell, George Washington left an indelible mark, not only as a military leader, but also as a statesman. His integrity, his humility, and his commitment to the ideals of the new nation were as crucial to his legacy as his military victories. This chapter in George's life marked the end of one journey and the beginning of another. As he bid farewell to his military career, he was unknowingly stepping towards a new role, one that would once again call upon his leadership in shaping the newly independent nation. Chapter 8: A New Nation. Even after the end of the Revolutionary War, George's service to his country was far from over. He might have left his military career behind, but his leadership skills were still in high demand. In 1787, he was called upon to participate in the Constitutional Convention in Philadelphia, a gathering intended to address the shortcomings of the then governing document, the Articles of Confederation. George was elected to preside over the convention, a role he accepted reluctantly but performed with great diligence. The convention was marked by vigorous debates and divergent views, but George's steady hand and impartial leadership kept the proceedings on track. The convention's outcome was the creation of the United States Constitution, a transformative document that set up a new structure for the government. It established a system of checks and balances among three branches of government: the executive, the legislative, and the judicial, and included provisions for amending the Constitution as the nation grew and evolved. George's role in the Constitutional Convention was pivotal. His presence lent credibility to the proceedings, and his leadership ensured that the deliberations were thoughtful and thorough. He himself did not contribute much to the debates, but his steadiness, patience, and unifying presence provided the balance needed for such a diverse assembly to come together and compromise. This chapter in George's life demonstrated his continued commitment to his country and his willingness to serve when called upon. His role in the creation of the United States Constitution underscored his belief in a government that was representative and balanced. It was an integral part of his journey, marking his transition from military hero to one of the key architects of a new nation. With the new Constitution adopted, the United States needed to elect its first president. Despite his desire for a quiet life at Mount Vernon, George found himself once again called to serve his nation. His leadership during the Revolutionary War and his role in the Constitutional Convention had only increased his standing in the eyes of his countrymen. In the first presidential election in 1788, George Washington was the unanimous choice of the electors. His election to the highest office was a testament to the immense respect and trust he had earned from his fellow Americans. But George accepted the role with trepidity, keenly aware of the immense responsibility it entailed. George was not a man who sought power, but he understood the significance of his presidency. As the first president of the United States, his actions would set precedents for the office. His leadership style, his decisions, even his personal conduct, would shape the expectations and standards for future presidents. In his inaugural address, George expressed his hope that the nation would remain united and steadfast in upholding the principles of the Constitution. He pledged to carry out his duties with integrity and diligence, putting the country's needs above personal interests. Becoming the first president of the United States was a significant chapter in George's life. The reluctant leader found himself at the helm of a new nation, facing the immense task of turning the ideals of the Constitution into a living, working government. It was a daunting responsibility, but one that George was prepared to shoulder, guided by his unwavering dedication to his country. As the first president of the United States, George was in uncharted territory. The Constitution provided a basic framework for the role, but the specifics of the office, its powers, its boundaries, its daily operations, were yet to be defined. George knew that his interpretation of the presidency would establish precedents for future leaders. One of the first issues he addressed was the formation of a presidential cabinet. The Constitution did not explicitly mention such a body, but George saw the value in having a group of advisors to help him navigate the complexities of governing. He appointed key figures like Thomas Jefferson, Alexander Hamilton, and Henry Knox, thus establishing the tradition of the cabinet. George also defined the diplomatic role of the president. He understood that the young nation needed strong but careful relationships with foreign powers. His proclamation of neutrality in 1793, in the midst of the war between Britain and France, set a precedent for American foreign policy, putting national interests first and avoiding entangling alliances. Perhaps one of George's most lasting precedents was his decision to step down after 2 terms in office. He could have stayed on. There was no constitutional limit to presidential terms at the time, but he chose to retire. His farewell address emphasized the dangers of factionalism and the importance of unity, further establishing the president's role as a unifying figure. George's presidency was marked by careful deliberation and a keen awareness of the importance of his actions. His decisions were not just about governing effectively, but about creating a blueprint for the future. Every step he took, every precedent he established, was shaped by his dedication to the ideals of the new nation. This chapter of George's life solidified his legacy as a statesman. His leadership helped guide a fledgling nation through its early years, setting the course for the United States to grow and prosper. Through his careful crafting of the presidency, George Washington became more than just the first president. He became the standard by which all future presidents would be measured. Chapter 9. Challenges of Presidency. As the first president of the United States, George Washington found himself in uncharted territory. The Constitution had established the role of the president, but it was up to George to interpret what that role would look like in practice. Every decision he made, every precedent he set, would shape the future of the presidency and the country. The task was not easy. George had to contend with a diverse and often divided Congress, negotiate relations with foreign powers, and address the economic challenges of the new nation. Each decision carried immense weight, as it would set a precedent for future administrations. One of the first challenges George faced was creating a functional government. He established the first presidential cabinet, appointing key figures to advise him on various matters. The creation of this cabinet was a crucial step in forming a structure for the executive branch of government. George also had to navigate the delicate balance of power between the executive, legislative, and judicial branches, as outlined in the Constitution. He recognized the importance of maintaining this balance to prevent any one branch from becoming too powerful. In the realm of foreign policy, George took a careful approach. He upheld a policy of neutrality, believing that the young nation should avoid entangling alliances and focus on its own growth and development. Navigating these unknowns was a daunting task, but George approached it with a clear vision and unwavering resolve. His leadership during these early years helped shape the presidency and guided the young nation through its first challenges. George's journey through uncharted territory was marked by careful decision-making, a respect for the principles of the Constitution, and a deep dedication to his country. It was a journey that tested his leadership skills and his commitment to the United States, further cementing his legacy as one of the nation's founding fathers. Even in the early years of the United States, political divisions were beginning to emerge. Two factions developed, each with different visions for the new nation. The Federalists, led by Alexander Hamilton, advocated for a strong central government and industrial development. In contrast, the Democratic Republicans, led by Thomas Jefferson, championed states' rights and an agrarian society. George found himself caught in the middle of these growing partisan divides. As president, he strived to remain neutral and discourage factionalism, but the political landscape around him was changing rapidly. George's cabinet meetings often became battlegrounds for these ideological disputes. Hamilton and Jefferson, both members of his cabinet, frequently clashed over economic policy, foreign affairs, and the interpretation of the Constitution. Despite the increasing partisanship, George worked tirelessly to maintain unity. He sought to mediate disputes, find common ground, and remind his cabinet members that they were all working towards the good of the nation. His farewell address further emphasized his concern over the growing partisanship, warning of the dangers of political factions. Navigating these political storms was a significant challenge for George. He was tasked with leading a country while managing intense political disagreements within his own administration. His ability to do so with grace and dignity demonstrated his diplomatic skills and commitment to national unity. In the face of the early storms of partisanship, George remained a steadfast leader, guiding the country through political disagreements and divisions. His presidency was a testament to his ability to lead through challenges and his unwavering commitment to the United States. His efforts laid a strong foundation for the new nation, setting it on a path towards growth and prosperity. One of the most significant challenges George faced as president was managing foreign relations. The young nation found itself in a world with powerful empires and shifting alliances. As president, George had to navigate these complex international waters. The French Revolution presented a particular challenge. The upheaval in France led to a conflict with Britain, and the United States found itself caught between its ally and its former colonial power. Opinions in the United States were divided, with some advocating for supporting France and others cautioning against involvement. George, however, chose a path of neutrality. He recognized that the young nation was not ready for another war and needed time to grow and consolidate. His proclamation of neutrality in 1793 was a bold move that demonstrated his commitment to putting the nation's interests first. The Jay Treaty with Britain in 1795 was another crucial aspect of George's foreign policy. Despite criticism, the treaty helped avert war with Britain and secured trade relations, greatly benefiting the United States economy. George's approach to foreign affairs was marked by pragmatism and foresight. He understood the complexities of international politics and the potential implications for the United States. His decisions may not have always been popular, but they were made with the long-term interests of the nation in mind. In handling foreign relations, George laid the groundwork for the principles that would guide United States foreign policy. His focus on neutrality and national interest would influence future presidents and play a significant role in shaping the role of the United States on the global stage. In the midst of international challenges, George's leadership stood firm, further solidifying his legacy as a founding father of the nation. Chapter 10. Legacy of a President. As George Washington's second term as president neared its end, he made the unprecedented decision not to seek re-election. He yearned for a quiet retirement at Mount Vernon, away from the pressures of public service. But before he stepped down, he had one final duty to perform, a farewell address to the nation he had served. In his farewell address, George did not merely say goodbye. He offered advice and guidance to the nation he had helped create. His words were filled with wisdom, warning against the dangers of political factions, emphasizing the importance of national unity, and advising caution in international relations. His call for unity resonated strongly, a reminder of the shared ideals and common goals that bound the states together. The unity of government is a main pillar in the edifice of your real independence, he wrote, underscoring the importance of staying united in the face of challenges. On foreign affairs, he advocated for neutrality, cautioning against becoming entangled in foreign alliances. This part of his address set the tone for what would become a long-standing tradition in United States foreign policy, maintaining national interests above all. George's farewell address was a testament to his wisdom, foresight, and dedication to his country. It was a guide for future generations, a blueprint for maintaining the nation's independence and unity. As he bade farewell to the nation, he left behind not just a legacy of leadership, but a roadmap for the country's future. His farewell marked the end of his presidential journey, but his influence on the nation was far from over. Even as he retired from public service, George Washington remained a figure of great importance in the nation's history, a symbol of leadership, virtue, and unwavering dedication to the United States. After 8 years of presidency, George Washington returned to his beloved estate, Mount Vernon. His journey back home marked the end of his public service and a return to the private life he had long yearned for. At Mount Vernon, George dedicated his time to the management and improvement of his estate. He resumed his agricultural experiments, tried out new farming methods, and took pleasure in the simple routines of rural life. It was a stark contrast to the constant pressures and challenges of the presidency, but it was a life that George enjoyed. But even in retirement, George's influence did not wane. He remained a respected figure, and his advice was often sought on matters of national importance. He carried the weight of his legacy with humility, always aware of his role in shaping the nation. Despite the peace and quiet of his retirement, George's health began to decline. His years of public service had taken a toll on his physical well-being. Nonetheless, he carried on, dedicated to his estate and his family until the end. George's return to Mount Vernon was a fitting end to his public journey. The man who had led an army to victory, presided over a constitutional convention, and served as the first president of the United States, was content to be a farmer once again. His retirement at Mount Vernon was not just a return to his roots, but also a testament to his character. Despite his monumental achievements, George remained humble and grounded. His post-presidential life was a reminder that for all his leadership and contributions, he was at heart a simple man dedicated to his land and his nation. George Washington's final years were spent away from the public eye, in the peace and tranquility of his beloved Mount Vernon. After decades of service to his nation, these years were a period of reflection and quiet contentment. George devoted himself to the care and management of his plantation. He oversaw the planting of crops, experimented with new farming techniques, and even expanded his landholdings. Despite his status as a national hero, he relished his role as a farmer and landowner. But even in his retirement, George never lost sight of the nation he had helped shape. He kept a keen eye on the unfolding events and politics, lending his wisdom and advice when needed. Even though he was no longer in office, his influence and legacy endured. While he found joy in his return to Mount Vernon, George also faced personal challenges. His health began to deteriorate, and he often fell ill. Despite his physical ailments, he remained stoic, bearing his sufferings with the same fortitude he had shown throughout his life. In December 1799, George Washington passed away at Mount Vernon, marking the end of an era. His death was met with a wave of national mourning. The country grieved for the loss of a leader, a hero, and a founding father. George's final years highlighted the depth of his character, his humility, his dedication to his home, and his enduring love for his country. Even in his last days, he embodied the ideals he had fought for: integrity, perseverance, and a deep-seated commitment to the United States. His legacy, etched into the very foundations of the nation, continues to inspire and guide generations to come. Chapter 11. The Last Goodbye. In December 1799, after nearly 3 years of tranquil retirement at Mount Vernon, George Washington fell severely ill. It was a cold, wintry day when he went out to survey his estate. Despite the harsh weather, he spent several hours outside in the freezing rain and snow. The following morning, he awoke with a severe sore throat and difficulty breathing. His condition quickly worsened, and he developed a high fever. Despite the attempts of his doctors to cure him using the medical practices of the time, his condition did not improve. George, who had always shown immense strength and resilience, was now frail and suffering. The illness was swift and severe, leaving him bedridden and weak. His family and friends watched helplessly as the health of their beloved leader deteriorated. Despite the pain and discomfort, George faced his illness with characteristic bravery and grace. He followed his doctor's advice, remained calm, and bore his suffering without complaint. The sudden onset of his illness shocked those around him. The man who had led an army, served as the first president, and helped forge a nation, was now fighting a different kind of battle. The final chapter of George Washington's life had begun, a chapter marked by pain, struggle, but also by immense courage and dignity. As George Washington's condition worsened, he found himself saying goodbye to his loved ones. One of the most poignant farewells was to his devoted wife, Martha. Martha had been by George's side through all the trials and tribulations of his life. Their marriage had been a pillar of strength and support for him. Now, as he lay on his deathbed, George reached out to Martha. Despite his pain and weakness, George comforted Martha. He expressed his love and gratitude for the years they had spent together. His words were filled with tenderness and affection, offering solace in the face of the inevitable. As he held Martha's hand, George made one last request. He asked her to bring 2 wills he had written and kept in a drawer. After looking them over, he ordered one to be burned, leaving only the final version. It was a final act of determination, ensuring that his affairs were in order even as his life was ebbing away. George's farewell to Martha was a touching testament to their enduring love. Even in his final moments, his thoughts were for her, seeking to ease her pain. It was a poignant reminder of the deep bond they shared, a bond that had stood the test of time and the challenges of life. Farewell, my love, marked the end of their journey together, a journey that had seen them through war and peace, hardship and joy, public life and private moments. Their love story, like George's own life, was a beacon of devotion, steadfastness, and enduring affection. On December 14, 1799, George Washington passed away at his beloved home, Mount Vernon. His death marked the end of an era, leaving a profound void in the young nation. The news of his death spread rapidly, plunging the country into mourning. The nation grieved for the loss of their hero, their first president, their father of the country. Bells tolled in towns and cities, flags were lowered to half-mast, and memorial services were held across the country. The people of the United States, though diverse in their origins and beliefs, were united in their grief. The man who had led them through the Revolution, presided over the creation of the Constitution, and served as their first president was no more. The depth of their sorrow reflected the profound respect and affection they held for George. In the wake of his death, tributes poured in, extolling George's leadership, courage, integrity, and dedication to the nation. He was remembered not just for his public deeds, but for his personal virtues, his humility, his resilience, and his unwavering commitment to his country. George Washington's death was more than just a national loss. It was the end of a journey that had shaped the United States in its earliest days. As the nation mourned, they also remembered the legacy of a leader who had guided them through their birth as a nation and left an indelible impact on their history. A Nation Mourns is not just about the loss of a leader, but about the legacy that leader left behind. George Washington's death marked the end of his life, but it was only the beginning of his legacy, a legacy that continues to inspire and guide the United States. Chapter 12. The Legend Lives. In the aftermath of George Washington's death, the nation found various ways to honor their fallen leader. His memory was enshrined in speeches, writings, and physical tributes that sought to capture his monumental contribution to the nation. Across the country, memorial services were held to remember George. Orations lauded his virtues, his leadership, and his unwavering dedication to the cause of American independence. Sermons in churches spoke of his strong moral character and his role as a unifier during the nation's turbulent early years. Physical tributes to George also began to emerge. Cities and towns were named in his honor, and monuments were erected to celebrate his life and achievements. The capital of the nation itself was named Washington, D.C., ensuring that his name would forever be linked with the heart of American governance. In 1800, a year after his death, Congress commissioned a marble statue of George for the Capitol. Similarly, on the centenary of his birth in 1832, construction began on what would become the Washington Monument, a towering obelisk in the nation's capital that stands as a testament to his enduring legacy. Honoring Washington was not just about mourning the loss of a leader, but about celebrating the life of a hero. Each tribute, each monument, and each commemorative act served as a reminder of the man who had devoted his life to the creation and service of the United States. His legacy was etched into the physical and cultural landscape of the nation, a constant reminder of the principles and values he stood for. The death of George Washington marked the end of his life, but it did not mark the end of his influence. His legacy, built over decades of dedicated service to his nation, continued to shape the United States long after he was gone. First and foremost, George left a blueprint for the presidency. His interpretation of the role, his establishment of protocols, and his leadership style set precedents that future presidents would follow. His commitment to stepping down after 2 terms, in particular, would become a cornerstone of American democracy. George's farewell address also had a lasting impact. His warnings about political factionalism and foreign entanglements would echo through American history, influencing generations of leaders and policymakers. Beyond his political contributions, George's personal virtues also left a lasting legacy. His integrity, humility, and dedication to service set a standard for public servants. He embodied the ideals of the American Revolution: liberty, justice, and the pursuit of happiness, and his life served as a testament to those values. George's impact on the United States was profound and far-reaching. His leadership during the Revolutionary War, his role in the creation of the Constitution, and his tenure as the first president laid the foundations for the nation. His ideals and principles became ingrained in the American identity. Washington's legacy is about more than just remembering a historical figure. It's about understanding the enduring influence of a leader who shaped the nation's past and continues to guide its future. George Washington may be gone, but his legend truly lives on, woven into the very fabric of the United States. As time passed, George Washington's place in history became increasingly clear. He wasn't just a historical figure. He was a founding father, a leader, and a symbol of the United States. His life and work had an immeasurable impact on the country and its development. George's leadership during the Revolutionary War marked him as a national hero. His strategic brilliance, combined with his ability to inspire and lead his troops, turned the tide of the war and led to the birth of a new nation. His actions during this time set a standard for military leadership and showcased his commitment to the cause of independence. As the first President of the United States, George laid the foundation for the office. His conduct, decisions, and principles established guidelines that future presidents would follow. His two-term limits set a precedent for political power transition, and his approach to the office ensured the presidency would not become a monarchy. Beyond his roles as a military leader and president, George's character left an indelible mark on the nation. His integrity, humility, and dedication were qualities that people admired and sought to emulate. He became a model of civic virtue, setting a high standard for those in public service. A Place in History reflects on George Washington's significant role in shaping the United States. His contributions during the country's formative years, his leadership, and his principles have secured his place in history as one of the nation's most influential figures. Even centuries later, his legacy continues to resonate, influencing the country's values, identity, and understanding of leadership. In the annals of history, George Washington stands tall, a symbol of the ideals and spirit of the United States. Chapter 13. Lessons Learned. As we reflect on George Washington's life, one of the most significant aspects that stand out is his military leadership. George first gained prominence as a soldier during the French and Indian War, where he learned vital lessons about warfare, leadership, and the harsh realities of battle. George's military expertise was honed during the American Revolution. As Commander-in-Chief of the Continental Army, he was tasked with leading a ragtag group of soldiers against one of the world's most powerful armies. Despite numerous challenges, including lack of supplies, inexperienced troops, and overwhelming odds, George demonstrated extraordinary leadership. His strategic brilliance was evident in his maneuvers and decision-making. But his military leadership went beyond strategic skills. George's ability to inspire his men, to maintain morale even in the darkest days of winter at Valley Forge, showcased his exceptional leadership. He was not just a commander to his troops, but also a source of inspiration. His unwavering resolve, his commitment to the cause of independence, and his ability to lead by example resonated deeply with his soldiers. His perseverance and dedication turned a group of undisciplined troops into an army capable of defeating the British. The Soldier reflects on George Washington's military leadership, revealing key lessons about resilience, strategic planning, and the power of inspirational leadership. His military career serves as a testament to his tenacity, his courage, and his unwavering commitment to his country. These lessons, learned on the battlefield, would serve him and the nation well as he transitioned into his role as the first President of the United States. When George Washington transitioned from a military leader to the political stage, he demonstrated a keen understanding of statecraft and governance. As the first President of the United States, he faced uncharted territory. There was no blueprint for his role, no guidelines for how to navigate the complex landscape of a newly born nation. Yet, George's political acumen shone through in these uncertain times. His ability to understand the complexity of political dynamics, to negotiate with differing views, and to make decisions in the best interests of the country demonstrated his statesmanship. One of his most important contributions was setting the precedents for the presidency. He carefully interpreted the Constitution to establish the role of the president, being careful not to overstep his powers, but also ensuring that the executive branch could effectively serve the nation. His decisions about his cabinet, the conduct of foreign affairs, and even the simple act of stepping down after 2 terms have had a lasting impact on the presidency. George's handling of political partisanship, both within his cabinet and in the broader political landscape, also demonstrated his political acumen. He consistently advocated for unity and worked hard to mediate between the emerging political factions. The Statesman provides an analysis of George Washington's political leadership and offers valuable lessons on statesmanship, leadership, and governance. His careful and thoughtful approach to politics, his commitment to national unity, and his respect for the Constitution offer timeless lessons for leaders and citizens alike. Behind the legendary figure of George Washington was a man of flesh and blood, a man with strengths and weaknesses, dreams and disappointments, joy and sorrow. Understanding George as a human being allows us to appreciate his accomplishments even more and offers valuable lessons about character and integrity. George was a man of deep convictions and strong character. His honesty, integrity, and sense of duty were apparent in his personal and public life. He carried these qualities into his leadership roles, earning the respect and trust of those he led. Yet he was not without his struggles. The death of his father when he was young, his lack of formal education, his disappointment at not having his own children, and his constant health problems. These personal challenges shaped him, made him resilient, and gave him a deep sense of empathy. George was also a man of great love. His devotion to his wife, Martha, was unshaken by the challenges of war and political life. His commitment to his family and friends, his loyalty to his soldiers, and his dedication to his nation showed the depth of his heart. In understanding the man, we learn about the power of character, the importance of personal values, and the human capacity for resilience. George Washington's life is a testament to the fact that great leaders are not born, but are shaped by their experiences, their values, and their decisions. His story is not just of a military leader or a president, but of a man who, despite his own struggles and challenges, left an enduring legacy that continues to inspire. Chapter 14. The Patriot's Path. George Washington's life journey can be traced through the key sites that mark significant events and periods of his life. Visiting these sites, we can gain a deeper understanding of the man and the world he lived in. Our journey begins in Westmoreland County, Virginia, where George was born. At his birthplace, we can imagine the young George growing up in a world of tobacco farming and colonial rule, a world that would soon be transformed by the stirrings of revolution. From there, we move to Mount Vernon, George's beloved estate. Here, he spent many years as a farmer, soldier, and statesman. This was also where he retreated after his presidency, and it was here that he spent his final days. The next stop is Philadelphia, where George attended the Constitutional Convention and served as the first president of the United States. The city, a hub of colonial life and politics, was where many significant events in George's life took place. We also visit the battlefield of Yorktown, the site of the decisive victory that ended the Revolutionary War. This is where George, as the commander of the Continental Army, led his troops to a victory that would change the course of history. Finally, we end our journey in Washington, D.C., the capital named in his honor. As we gaze upon the Washington Monument, we reflect on the incredible journey of the man who helped shape a nation. Walking in his footsteps allows us to experience the stages of George Washington's life, from his humble beginnings to his monumental achievements. Each site offers a glimpse into his world and his experiences, reminding us of the journey that made him the man he was. George Washington's words, like his deeds, have left a lasting impression. His speeches, letters, and personal notes are a treasure trove of wisdom, revealing his thoughts on leadership, responsibility, freedom, and human nature. One of George's most well-known quotes is, "Happiness and moral duty are inseparably connected." This quote encapsulates George's belief in the relationship between personal ethics and satisfaction, a belief that guided his life and work. In his farewell address, George left many memorable quotes. One that stands out is, "Unity of government is a main pillar in the edifice of your real independence." This quote emphasizes George's belief in the importance of a united country, a concept that was crucial during the early years of the American nation. George also offered wisdom on leadership. He once said, "I hope I shall always possess firmness and virtue enough to maintain what I consider the most inviolable of all titles, the character of an honest man." This quote illustrates the high value he placed on integrity in leadership. His views on freedom are best captured in his quote, "Liberty, when it begins to take root, is a plant of rapid growth." These words underline his commitment to the cause of American independence and his faith in the resilience and potential of a free nation. His words live on, explore some of George Washington's most inspiring quotes, offering us a glimpse into his wisdom and beliefs. His words resonate even today, guiding and inspiring future generations. Through his words, we get to know the man behind the legend, understanding his thoughts, values, and hopes for the nation he helped create. The impact of George Washington's life extends far beyond his time. His legacy, embodied in his words and deeds, continues to shape the United States and inspire future generations. As the first president, George Washington set numerous precedents for the office. His decision to step down after 2 terms, his establishment of a cabinet, and his approach to executive power are foundations of the American presidency. His farewell address, with its advice on unity, public debt, and foreign alliances, continues to be relevant to political discourse. George's leadership during the Revolutionary War also remains an inspiring example of military leadership. His strategic acumen, his resilience in the face of adversity, and his unwavering commitment to his troops have served as a guide for military leaders across history. Perhaps most importantly, George's character continues to be a model for all Americans. His honesty, integrity, humility, and dedication to service are timeless values, as important today as they were in his time. The Legacy Continues is about the enduring influence of George Washington. It's about a man whose spirit lives on in the country he helped build, in the values he embodied, and in the people he continues to inspire. His life is a testament to the potential within each of us to make a difference, to lead with integrity, and to serve our communities with dedication. His legacy is not just in the past, but is ongoing, a continuous source of inspiration and guidance for future generations.